Janelle here again, and today I'm going to tell you the story of Cenerentola, which is the Italian adaptation of Cinderella. So how the story goes is there's a prince, and he's a widower, and he has one daughter named Zozola, who is the apple of his eye. And he needs to get remarried, and Zozola goes to her governess, who she absolutely adores, and says, "Oh, how I wish you would be my new mother." And the governess says, "Okay, well, if you want that, here's what you do." So Zozola spent weeks talking up the governess to her father over and over and over until he finally bends and he actually marries the governess. On the night of the wedding, a dove flutters down to Zozola and says, "If you ever need anything, send your regards to the dove of the fairies," and flutters away. So things go pretty well for Zozola for a while. The governess is just showering her with gifts and love and affection. Everything's great until one day the governess, stepmom, brings her 6 daughters out of the woodwork and plays them up so much to the father that he forgets all about Zozola and loses all affection for her, and it goes to the stepdaughters, and they move Zozola downstairs to by the fireplace, all covered in soot, and they change her name from Zozola to Cenerentola, which means cinder. So one day, the father is going to go on business in Sardinia, and he asks his stepdaughters, "What can I bring you?" And they say, "Jewels and dresses and luxury items." And then sort of mockingly, he asks Cenerentola, "And what can I get for you, my child?" And she says, "Oh, you don't need to get me anything, father. Just send my regards to the dove of the fairies. But if you forget my request, may your ship neither move forwards nor backwards." And he sort of laughs it off and goes about his business in Sardinia and picks up the dresses and the jewels, but completely forgets about Cenerentola. So he boards the ship, and of course, it can move neither forwards nor backwards. And that night, the captain of the ship is sleeping, and he's visited by a fairy who says, "If you're wondering why your ship cannot move, it is because one of your crew members forgot to fulfill a promise to his only child." And the captain wakes up and goes to the father, who shamefully admits that he totally forgot about Cenerentola. So he goes to the Grotto of the Fairies and gives the regards to the queen fairy, who steps out of a tree, this beautiful maiden, and says thank you for her regards, and gives him a date tree, a little golden pot, a little shovel, and a watering can, and a little silk napkin. And so he goes back with all the gifts for his daughters, and Cenerentola is absolutely ecstatic. That night, there is a ball of the king of the land, and the whole family kind of runs off to the ball. Cenerentola goes into the garden and plants her tree, and waters it, hoes it, dabs it with the silk cloth, and says a little prayer that the fairy asked her to say, which was, "My little date tree, I have planted thee, hoed thee, watered thee, dabbed thee with thy napkin, now dress me speedily." And out comes a fairy who dresses her in the most extravagant gowns and jewels, and of course she goes to the ball, and the king falls madly in love with her, and as she's leaving, the king sends a servant to chase after her and see who she is. Now Cenerentola is riding away in her carriage, and she sees the servants following her, so she takes a handful of coins and throws them down, and the servant stops to pick them up and totally forgets about Cenerentola and loses her. And the king is furious. So he says, "I will throw another ball tomorrow." And of course, the whole same thing happens. The whole family goes out. Cenerentola goes into the backyard, goes to her date tree, says her little prayer, and is dressed in more extravagant gowns, looking like a queen, with a carriage and footmen and everything. And she goes back to the palace for the ball, where he falls even more in love with her. And this time, the servant chases after her. She throws down jewels and pearls rather than coins, and he stops and picks them up, and by the time he comes back to the palace, the king is absolutely furious, and he says, Okay, I'm throwing one last ball and you better not lose her this time. So, after kicking the servant in the butt, he throws the ball the next day, and Cenerentola goes back to the ball. They dance, and he keeps her a little bit longer this time. And as she's running away in the carriage, the servant isn't following the coins or the jewels she's dropping. And they run over a bump, and her shoe falls off. And so the servant picks up the shoe, brings it back to the castle, and the king orders all the ladies in the kingdom to come to the castle to try on the shoes. And, of course, it doesn't fit anybody. And the king says, somebody has been left out. What woman has not been here to try the shoe on? And Cenerentola's father says, my king, I do have one daughter, but she is unfit to even eat off of your floor. And then the king says, well, then she will be the first to try the shoe on. So Cenerentola comes to the castle, and the king can already tell it's her. But as soon as she approaches, the shoe zooms out of his hand and magnetically flies to her foot. And he says, you are the woman I've been looking for. They lived happily ever after. The end.